Spring in Wyoming. Chapter 2C. Frank, are you interested in the adventure outside? Do you mean to the beach? Instead, I mean is riding across the mountain. I didn't get riding. Then you can start learning. I can teach you. Really? Asked Frank enthusiast. Larry nodded. As long as we have the vacation. So, are you interested in? Of course. Great then. I wait for you at my house. This is the address, said Larry while giving a business card. Frank gave a strange look. I don't need that. I know where your apartment is. Larry smiles. Oh, my mistake. I forgot to explain. I invite you to my ranch in Wyoming. I'll manage your journey. You only need to walk a bit and enjoy the rest. A ranch? Of yours? Frank sounded not fully believe. He felt dumb. After all their months, Larry never said anything about his privacies. Frank had heard once about a little house at Wyoming. But, a ranch? Do you have a private jet? Frank asked. Larry chuckled. I'm not that rich. But I have a limousine. Why don't you use it? I put it in New York. Yet now often being used for office needs. Besides, I prefer a cab. Frank is still lost in his amaze. You are really the heir of the famous Watson Company? Larry only smiles. Be sure you're coming okay? At about 9 o'clock in the morning, a cab enters the ranch's yard. Frank took a deep breath when he had just set foot on the ground. A man approached him. Good morning, Mr. Russell, his greeting friendly. Good morning, George, Frank replied, smiling. They previously met when George visited Larry in L.A. George is better known as Larry's right-hand man than just an employee. Larry once called him, friend from the past. Where is Larry? Mr. Watson is still practicing for horse riding match. Let me bring your bag. No need. I do not bring much stuff. George smiled. Please sir, he opened the door of the fence. They immediately walked. Someone seemed to approach them. He wears a complete jockey outfit with his helmet. He directly descended from his horse when he is in front of them. Frank, you've come? Sorry I did not pick you up. Frank almost didn't believe in his eyesight. Larry? Is that you? Larry opens his helmet. Come in, he said after previously signaled George to take his white horse. George did it obediently. What an amazing place, Frank praises. Thank you. Larry smiles. He invites Frank into the house. Frank looks impressed at the country-style home. Some antique furnishings are neatly arranged, combined with a modern-style sofa. A comfortable armchair is placed near the fireplace. All seemed graceful and harmonious. I will show your room. Larry gives Frank cues up the stairs. Larry opened a room door. This is your room. Frank looks at the room. A comfy bed in the center. Beside it, a phone on a small table. A commode, television, and another door into the bathroom in the corner. It's used your room? Frank asked. Yes, Larry said briefly. He is organizing the equipment that Frank had brought. Come on, show me something. He opens a large window in that room. Look. Wow, fantastic. Frank seems to amaze. From the room, the view seemed very clear from the horses and expanses of grass and valleys to the Rocky Mountains extending southward. If you want to get a clearer view, look through that balcony, Larry pointed to the side. Here is fun, no wonder if you like this place, said Frank with a smile. Suddenly he remembers something. Hey, when are we walking around? She asked impatiently. Tomorrow morning. Where are we going? Asked Frank curiously. Do you have a specific request? Larry replied. It's up to you. How about riding? Frank gave an idea. That's for sure. We can be riding later in the afternoon. Why not now? Frank asked again. Did you not get tired? Not at all. Hey, how about this? Today we ride around here. And tomorrow, you should take me to your favorite places, agree? Frank persuades. Larry seems to think for a moment. Well, he decides. I can teach you to be riding after lunch. Frank smiled happily. Frank has just come out of his room when he hears Larry's voice from the outside. He rushes out. Frank sees Larry is riding a horse. If earlier Larry appearance like a nobleman, with his jockey and white horse. Now he is like a sheriff, with a checkered shirt, a cowboy vest and hat, riding a brown horse. "Hi Frank, do you want to ride?" asked Larry cheerfully. "Sure, I'm looking forward to it," says Frank while riding on the back of the horse brought by George. They strolled. "It's time to learn, Frank," Larry says while spurring his horse slowly. Frank tried to catch up. "Hey, can I ride your white horse?" he asked. "Of course, choose whichever you like. We will be riding there." Larry points to the valley. "But you have to be careful, Frank, that horse is not so tame, especially in the new person." Larry flashes his eyes. "Oh yeah? I can't believe." Frank is dismissive. Larry shrugged. "Try it," he said briefly. Frank descended from his horse, then walked up close to the fence. It is close to the white horse. Larry only pays attention from his horse. Frank ride the white horse. You see, nothing happens. Unfinished Frank's talk, the horse is neighing while lifting his front legs high. Frank fall down. Larry immediately down from his horse. "Frank, are you okay?" he asks worry. "Yeah, I'm okay," Frank answered while standing up. "I've warned you," Larry said. They walked toward the horse. Larry holds the horse rope. "Now you can ride," he said. Frank refuses. "I think it hates me," he said hesitated. Especially when the horse neighing again and lifted its front foot high. "Hey, that's okay. Frank is my friend," Larry said, holding the rope and patting the horse's back with compassion. The horse is immediately calm. Frank is staring at him. "If you treat your pet well, they even better know the favor of a human being." Larry smiled. "Come, ride up," he invited. Frank staring at him in doubt. "Trust me," said Larry convinced. Frank rides up the horse. "Okay, I trust you. Where are we going now?" he asked cheerfully. Larry smiled. "Follow me," he said, as he rides up on his horse again. They both smiled, then spur each of their horses. About an hour later, they arrived at a hill. Frank sits on the ground, wiping his sweat. Actually, the distance they traveled can be reached in only 15 minutes by car. However, Frank insisted that the two of them go by horse. That meant increasing the time to short learn, even though Larry had chosen the tame horse for him. "Are you tired, Frank?" Larry asked while threw a fresh apple. Frank accepted it. Frank didn't answer right away. "Next time we go by car, Larry. I don't want to lead my horse up this hill for the second time. Too difficult for me, I'm not accustomed to." Larry smiled. "That's what you want, right?" he asked. "All right, I admit it's my fault," Frank replied, chewing an apple. "But never mind, let's talk about something else." Frank changed the subject. "About what?" Larry asked back. Frank approached. "About Gary." Larry fell silent. "You already know," he replied. "The captain did tell it. He said you two look alike. Is it true?" Frank was increasingly curious. "Larry, come on," he urged again. "What do you want to know?" Larry looked at Frank. "His character, his career, everything." Frank replied. Larry laughed. "Frank, that's too much. Just say what you really want to know." "Everything, okay? That's too much. The captain has told me." Larry, how did he die?" Frank asked cautiously. Larry gasped. "It's a long story," he said softly. "Tell me," Frank pleaded. Larry looks away. "Starting from an accident." "Accident?" Larry turned his head. "Actually not. But murder." "How did it happen?" Frank asked again. "Someone broke into our car. From the results of the investigation, the police found a device that could make sparks, so our car caught fire and then exploded. We were both thrown into the air then." "Then, what happens?" Frank asked. Larry shook his head, weakly. "I am not sure. At that moment, I could vaguely see our car on fire. After that, I don't know what happened." "How can it be?" Frank asked in surprise. "That was done by Jack. A mechanic used to check our car, but it turns out he was also the man who put the device." "You didn't see Gary?" Larry shook his head. "I only knew that he was hurt. The captain always said he was fine. He did not say that Gary had been buried militarily 2 hours earlier." "When did you ask that?" "After I conscious of the operation. 1 day after the incident," said Larry quietly. "How pathetic." Yes, even just before I got out of the hospital, I didn't know Gary was gone. The captain told the other fellows to keep it secret from me. They were silent. Frank looked into the valley, then looked right. He sees Larry bowed while playing a stone in his hand. Frank feels bad. But his curiosity encouraged him to keep asking. Larry, may I ask you something? But, that's even if you don't mind, Frank said in doubt. Larry nodded. How you feel? I mean, are you traumatized? Larry smiled bitterly. I think so, until now, I can't remember the whole incident. Maybe it should be. Frank is a leader. Larry sighed, confirming Frank's words. You know, I'm so devastated by that case. You know why? Larry's questions float. Gary's death? Larry shook his head. No, not that. Previously we both had bad intuition. We knew that it could be a loss of life at any time, even though it was not thought to me soon. If it wasn't Gary's death, then what? Frank asked curiously. I felt unfairly treated, as I knew that the court finally decided Dick was free. The trial said was no evidence and enough witnesses. So it was only considered as a regular accident. Larry takes a deep breath. How can it? There is already evidence. That's murder. Frank said emotionally. Yes, but the verdict is done. The killer is never seen anymore. So did the judge. Did not you investigate? My team and I have been investigating it. We found evidence that the juror and judges received bribes. Larry's hand clenching. If only I knew that the court can be bought, Frank, if I want to, I also can bribe that judge with whatever money he asked. But it's not right to do. Besides, no use anymore now. The case was closed. Larry exhale. We are always obedient to the procedure that says we are forbidden to shoot if not really forced. While the criminals we face, they do not have rules. They can kill them whenever they want. Frank looks at the emotion-looking Larry. You know, Frank. When others say it's just an accident, Larry shook his head. I'd like to say that they're wrong. Gary is a murder victim. But people just assume it's an ordinary accident. I often say it to myself, but I still can't accept it because I know it's not true. You will not be able to lie. And I never find the justice that I am looking for, until now.